So I'm on my way home from our Saints and Sinners Car Club Cool Rides and Campy event in Maridocia at their first May Days event. And I'm driving my old 67 Dodge D200 Camper Special. Very rough around the edges, very patina truck. But I was really pleasantly surprised at how much attention it got. I'll be the first to admit that I can get pretty self-conscious about the appearance of my hot rods. The whole patina thing has really gotten popular, and that's absolutely great, but sometimes I still can't help but feel like, and I wish my truck was a little shinier, you know, better condition, stuff like that. But the conversations that I had and some of the young people coming up and asking me about the truck and talking about it, it just kind of blew me away. And one person even was like, man, this is the best looking truck here. The only truck there, but I got what he meant. And it just made me happy. And so I got to tell the story of the truck a little bit. As I'm driving home, I thought maybe it'd be kind of fun to make a short video telling the story of the truck, at least the story of what I know it. A long time ago, family friends, my grandparents were up with some friends, and there were a couple old trucks and cars that ended up getting pictures painted of them. And my mom and dad ended up with one of, well, I think both of the pictures. And one thing led to another, and they ended up going up to Minnesota to pick up, I can't remember what year it is. It's like a 54, I think, Dodge truck that got Polara K-frame swapped into it. So it had a 440 in it and disc brakes. Really cool truck. Maybe I'll make a video of that someday. But they went up and got that, and while they were there, they were shooting some videos or taking pictures and sent to me. And this old truck was sitting there with a big old camper in the back of it. I started asking questions about it just from, you know, it being kind of like Dad's old truck, Old Blue, also a 67 Camper Special. And one thing led to another, and a couple years later, we all convoyed up to Minnesota and rescued a couple things. So we had my mom and my grandma and my girls. Vincent wasn't born yet. And my cousin Olivia was up visiting. They were in a full-size Dodge van with a 318 Magnum in it, hauling their aluminum car trailer. Then we had my dad and our old 95 12-valve Cummins with the flatbed on it, named the Deer Slayer. He was pulling my car trailer, and then I was in the old 3rd gen Cummins, and we were pulling my brother-in-law's 30-foot gooseneck. And we convoyed up there. The convoy itself had a bunch of interesting trips. At one point, we were abruptly making an exit off the interstate, and I about got run over by a semi. That was fun. In that whole process, I don't know if it was that time or a different instance, all of a sudden Dad had to cram on the brakes of the 12-valve and promptly blew a brake line. So we ended up replacing brake lines on the side of the interstate at like 9 o'clock at night, something like that. Mom ended up having to go into town, and for the nearest town, bought some new brake line materials, flare nuts, flaring kit, all that. Yeah, that was a fun endeavor. Another time, the drain on the bottom of the fuel filter for the 12-valve decided to come off. And all of a sudden I'm following, and all of a sudden it's like it's raining, but it wasn't rain. It was diesel fuel from the 12-valve splashing up on the windshield of my truck. And so we got everyone pulled over and ended up having to get creative with part numbers. and found a fuel filter that we could thread on there that did not have the drain on it or the sensor. Got that on, bled the fuel system on the 12 valve, got it back on the road. Had to unhook the trailer brake controller because it was locking the brakes up on the van, on the trailer from the controller in the van. So disabled that, rolled into our campsite about 1 in the morning, something like that. The staff graciously woke up and let us in. So that was fun. Then we finally made it to Minnesota. Gorgeous property. Oh, it was so pretty. I think it was like 100 acres or something like that. She had a little cabin that she let us camp in. And so then we camped. The next day we got up and sized up our jobs. The camper special was fairly easy to get to. It was kind of on a main road. We ended up picking up a 63, I think, Dart GT. And also, I think it's either a 62, 63, somewhere in there, Plymouth Lancer 4-door that had a slant 6 in it. And then also a Chrysler Boat. I'll try to plug in some pictures of those cars here in the video. Loaded all that up, which was an interesting task in itself. At one point we had a winch snatch block to a branch on a tree, so we had to pick the rear end of the Dart off the ground, or off the trailer, so we could flip the ramps back up, because they were too long and it was hanging over. We're like, well, we can, you know, those ramps, you could like take them halfway up and strap them down, or they've got a bar on it. Well, that wasn't going to work. They were going to be like that far off the road, and that would have been a long trip. So yeah, winch to a snatch block on a tree, back down to the car, picked it up, slid it over, flipped the ramp up, and then did the other way, flipped that ramp up, and then got it tied down. There was about some engines there, so we ended up picking up like an all aluminum slant 6. Dad's got that. I don't know if he's going to try to fix it up or what. We got some quarter panels for the Cordoba that hopefully will someday find their way on that, you know, do some rust repair there. And then of course the camper special. Unfortunately, the camper that it had in the bed was so rotten that it was not going to make the trip back to Illinois. I was so upset that we couldn't leave it. Maybe a little more so upset about it now than I was back then, but I really wish we could have saved that. But once we took it out of the truck and we hauled it to a junkyard for the lady, on the way to the junkyard, it was falling in, the roof fell in, one of the walls was falling off. There's no way. It just was not going to be safe. So we got that out. Like I said, we took it to a junk, or a dump, which that was interesting in itself too, that whole process. We actually got to drive to the top of the dump pile, and they came up with like a loader, I guess, and pushed it off the trailer. That was kind of interesting. Somehow we ended up not getting a flat tire on the trailer or the truck during that, so that was a plus. So we got all loaded up and made our journey back. We stopped at the gal's son's place a little further south and paid him, and he had some really cool old cars there too. Almost made a deal for a Plymouth Trail Duster, but just money wasn't right and just couldn't make it work. But that was kind of a cool experience. And we camped there also, and the next day it was going to be the final leg of our trip. We go to pull out and the old third gen started making noise. Holy cow, I thought the engine was done. It sounded like a rod knock, or a bearing had completely seized or something, but oh, it was making some bad noise. So I pulled over and got to looking at it, and the water pump decided to let go. The bearings in that were shot. You could grab the front of the water pump and move it. Like, you could almost pull the pump out of the the housing. It was that bad. So once again, we sent Mom off to a parts store to pick up a water pump and some coolant. I stayed back and started taking the pump off the 3rd gen on the side of the interstate. We were in town at that point, I think. So we were on the side of the road in town. It was like a 4-lane road though. Pulled the water pump off. At that point, I think Dad started messing with the brake controller. Actually, I ended up helping him. We found a wire had come unloose. I think when someone was driving it, their foot got up in the wiring harness. No, dang, the old truck died. Need to rebuild the carburetor. But anyway, their foot got up in there and pulled the wire out of the controller, and so it was, you know, get connection, then would lose connection. It was just a mess. So we fixed that, got the water pump on the truck. I didn't have, you know, a funnel or anything, you know, to burp the cooling system, and it had an air pocket in it. We got going down the road and we got caught up in traffic. I had 2 cars on the gooseneck trailer, and so, you know, it was not easy to get off the road or anything like that in that kind of traffic. And oh, that truck got hot. I don't know how we didn't blow a head gasket on that Cummins, but it stayed together. We got the air out, we burped it, we got some lunch, we hit the road, and ended up again in some crazy heavy traffic. At one point ended up having to drag race a semi so we could get over because the road was going to end in the lane I was in. Then one point I'm behind my dad and he's next to a semi, and he's like, them back there, they need over there. And so when the light turned green, the semi stopped, stayed there, blocked traffic so we could get up around it. So whoever that semi guy or semi truck driver was, thank you. After that point, the rest of the trip was pretty uneventful. Of course, it was super late when we got back home, and unfortunately tempers were kind of high. Oh, this was during COVID too. And so we couldn't go into any any restaurants to eat or anything like that. The lobbies were all closed. It was late, and we had rolled into Quincy, and we just wanted to grab a quick bite from McDonald's, and they had pretty well closed. The lobby was closed, but the manager saw us there with the big trailers and everything, and as we were trying to figure out where else to go or if we were just skipping dinner, she came out and let us in so we could order our food, get it and everything. And again, thank you to whoever that was. So at that point we got back home to Winchester. It was dark, it was late, we were tired, tempers got a little high, but all in all, we got everything unhooked and moved on. And then, so that, I think the next day I had to go to work. And so I drove the camper special on into work and kind of started tinkering on it during my lunch hour and whatnot. And I think it was that day I was able to get it run. I had to file the points, replace the ignition switch, and some stuff like that. And I did get it to run. I believe the reason that it got parked all the years ago, I think the sticker was 94 was the last time the truck had been driven. So it had sat up there for basically 30 years. Not quite 30 years at the time, I guess. But a freeze plug had rusted out in the block and just had never gotten changed. And so I had to go through and replace all the freeze plugs. The radiator cap had been left off, and the radiator and the engine was completely full of pine needles. So I flushed it so many times, but it still was getting hot. Ended up having to put an aluminum radiator in it that I had, which I had, it wasn't the right one for the truck, but I didn't have any money. And so I asked my father-in-law, who's a pretty talented welder, if he could take the lower neck from the radiator and move it to the other side. And so he did that for me, and I got that put in.
Had to go through all the brakes, of course, new wheel cylinders, hardware, drums, or not drums, shoes. It's got drum brakes front and rear, so went through those. Brakes work really good. Had the 2-barrel Stromberg carburetor on the old 318, and really it ran good. It just, I don't know, I eventually decided I wanted a 4-barrel on it, a little more power. So I ended up putting an Edelbrock RPM air gap intake that I had laying around, put that on there, and a Holly carburetor that I got from a friend that it's a vacuum secondary manual choke, not a real great carburetor, but good enough for this. But I never have rebuilt it, and it could use a kit. As you saw earlier, the truck died on me. So we'll get that rebuilt. Had an issue with the exhaust. It was actually hitting. It had rusted out, of course, and there was a clearance issue, so I ended up putting some long tube headers on it. Ran duals. It sounds pretty good. Some of the bends were not real great, but it was my first time bending exhaust on my own, so I'm still pretty pleased with how it came out. Ended up with a parts truck, and was able to get a tailgate, because with that camper in, the tailgate wasn't there. So I got a tailgate on the truck. And yeah, pretty well just been driving it ever since. I love the truck. I love the conversations that it sparks. Being able to kind of tell the story. I'm happy to have been able to save the truck. And I really don't see myself ever doing any body work or anything like that. I might patch the floors and fix a few little things on it here and there, but it's just going to stay patina and drive it and have fun. So here's Campy, for those of you that haven't seen him before. The brush bar was on there when we got it, kind of neat. Dad hooked me up with the slots. He had those sitting in the barn for who knows how long. 16.5s. I was able to source some Firestone, or they 950 R16.5s. Just kind of, I don't know, they fit. It looks right. Old school. Nothing too fancy or anything like that. Here's, this fender's pretty rough. And at some point, I don't know what the deal is, but you know, the weld there, some sort of repair. It's got some welds up under the cowl, you know, in the firewall area too, which is, I don't know, just kind of peculiar. It is a custom cab, so it's got the nicer dash. I'll show you guys that here in a second. Friend of mine gifted me the toolbox. Since I couldn't have the camper in it, I at least wanted a toolbox. Kind of give it that work truck vibe type of thing. So he gifted me that, and fits pretty good. I didn't want one of the newer aluminum style in it because that just wouldn't look right. So an older metal box will do just fine. Here are the brackets where the camper was fastened to. That one's still in good shape, but this one back here rusted off. Let's see. There's the tailgate I got off the parts truck. So personalized plates there. Just kind of started calling it Campy because it had the camper in it, and you know, it stuck, so had to get the plates for it. It had a giant bumper on it. I don't know. I didn't like the look, and it wasn't a real good shape, so I ditched the bumper. So right now, I'm just going with no bumper. Eventually, I'm going to put a hitch on the truck so I can pull a trailer. But for now, we're just sticking with it like that, which is actually the way my dad's camper special is also. It doesn't have a bumper, just a trailer hitch. So maybe that's why I like it without the bumper, because it reminds me of Old Blue. Bed's really not in bad shape. It's got some rust on it, but not like the front fenders. At some point, the glass on my mirror got broken out. I think it might have gotten into a garage door or something is why it broke. Rust in the door there. Some damage up here in the cowl again too. The old 318 developed a oil leak on me, so don't judge me too much on the oil spots on the timing cover, but there's the intake on it. Have not had the 318 apart, other than took the intake off and put the 4-barrel on it and replaced all the freeze plugs. Ignore the bungee cord battery hold down. I got busy, didn't have time to do it right. I'll fix it here soon, I promise. There's the aluminum radiator, made some quick brackets. Could have done better work, but it was one of those get it done in a hurry so I could hit the road for some show I was trying to go to or something like that. But so not gonna win any show or trophies at shows, but it makes me happy and makes other people happy, so that's all that matters. Go ahead and shut that back. Oh, if you don't know about these old swept lines, one of the coolest things about these trucks, and I know if you've watched Roadkill, Freiberger talks about it, but look at that hood. It opens all the way up, so you have all the room to work in here. I love it. I always thought that was so cool growing up. I'd go out to where Old Blue was parked, and I'd just open the hood and just look at the old big block in there and just dream. Did not replace the gas tank. I just had to clean it out. It wasn't too bad. Here's the custom cab. The big thing about the custom cabs was the dash was a little nicer. So the trim plate around here was nicer than the base model trucks. And then it has the dash pad. The base model trucks didn't come with that. I always loved the shifter up here too. That's the same as Dad's truck. This key ring came with the truck. I always thought it was kind of cool. US Jet. I wonder if they're still around. And the knobs and stuff, most of that stuff doesn't work. I haven't messed with any of the heater or anything like that. It actually looks like the bottom of that is rusted out, but that's what it is. So, like I said, just a cool old truck. 99,000 miles. Yep. Cool old truck.